Welcome back to the realm of unpopular opinions. Before we get into it, because I'm going to yap, there is one thing I want to highlight for anyone out there wondering who might have clicked on this video. I am not a research-based person in general. Like, this video will not be me pulling case studies, statistical analyses, scouring the internet for sources. I will not be doing that because I am in university and I have quite enough of it. I am sick and tired of it, and I am just an opinion-based person as far as this is concerned. Me talking to myself is concerned. I care about people's opinions, their personal views, how they feel about things. I do not care about facts or evidence because I get enough of that as it is. I am not going to be sitting here giving an opinion and then someone writing me in the comments and saying source, because I get enough of that by my professors. So, because you apparently are not allowed to have like a singular, solitary, original thought. All that aside, let's get into the video, and I hope it's even mildly interesting or helpful or just a way to pass the time. The first segment, the first part of this video will be why I think big books are great, why I personally really love reading them and have always loved reading them, even though I was sometimes a little bit too young or didn't know English well enough to be able to consume them. The Wheel of Time is a prime example. I tried to read this series twice before I actually read it all the way through because I couldn't get into it. It was too long for my attention span as a child, and I didn't know English well enough to read them, so I read the translation, but I didn't really like the translation. There was a whole story there. Point being, why I actually do, on the whole, love them. My first and primary argument, you could say, in favor of long books is the immersion aspect. Now, the problem with this, or rather the counter argument to this, is that if you're not someone who reads the genres that I read, which are fantasy, primarily fantasy, big books are also dense. Long fantasy doesn't have to be dense because it's not always a slow-paced, episodic genre where it feels like one book is one episode, so it feels like an overdrawn episode. Very often fantasy books just feel like a film, so it doesn't feel long or drawn out or slow, with exceptions. However, I also read classics, and they can also sometimes be very long and very chunky, and like they're taking years off your life. But I do also love long classics. We will get to that in the next segment, why I think they're psychologically intimidating and uncomfortable for people to dive into. But for now, the one thing that I want to say why I love them is the immersion aspect, because even if you're not like the biggest fan of it, if you like it enough to finish it, the immersion is pretty much unparalleled. Like, you feel like you've gone through so much with these people, like you've spent so much time in this world, whether a fictional world or the world of the book specifically, that it just feels unparalleled. It feels like you've watched 7 seasons back to back of their lives, of their interactions, of what they're doing in the world, of what their conflicts are, of their triumphs. It feels like you've gone through so much with these people that you know them on a level that I think it would take several shorter books to achieve. But that's the argument, isn't it? Like, what's the difference between one long book and 3 consecutive shorter books? And I think the difference psychologically is exactly the same as series and episodes and films. Like, as a fan, as a watcher of both, I can adequately compare it to books, how it makes me feel psychologically. And that is that often you don't feel like committing to a film because it's like one big chunk, but you have no problem watching 27 episodes in a row because they're shorter chunks. You can technically stop after every episode, which makes it easier to keep going. It's the same psychological aspect of why people find it easy to read 300-page books, but if they see a 900-page book, all of a sudden it feels endless. It feels daunting. But that's the good aspect of it for me, because while I love series and I feel like you can dive deeper into stuff, a good immersive film, whether it's an hour and a half, 2 hours, or 3 hours, you are so into that world that if it's a good film that strikes you to your core, you feel like you can't leave it. Like after a film that immersed you so much into its 2 or 3 hours, like you feel like you know every inch of it, like every aspect of it, every character, every emotion it made you feel, every place they went to. It feels like a series doesn't always get that out of you until a lot has been watched, but a film can make you feel incredibly immersed because it's that unstopped chunk that you've sat there watching it, ideally, that you didn't go to the bathroom 13 times and made dinner in between. While the comparison isn't quite the same because long books are quite a bit longer than films are, like it takes you so much longer to read a 900-page book than it is to watch a 3-hour film, the effect is the same. You can absolutely get immersed in a series where every single book is 300 pages, but it will take you longer to get there than I feel like it would in a 900-page book. Or I could just be lying, and it's just how I feel about it. But the core of my thesis for why I love long books is that it feels like I live there. It feels like I've moved in and I am inhabiting this place alongside the characters, like the Wheel of Time. You don't need to read like 9 books to get 11. That's book 11. 11 books to get the immersion effect. I feel like Eye of the World is enough for you to feel like you're entrenched into this world and like you've already been through so much with these characters, and then you add on like another 14 books, and like you feel like you've known these people intimately for years. Like every time I get to the end of the Wheel of Time, and my father especially, who read it like at least 5 or 6 times, you just want to go back because it feels like you read book 1 like ages ago. Ages ago. Like it feels like such a journey. And that's the beauty of it, because after a 900-page book, like I know the inners of this author's mind and their workings as a writer. And these characters feel like, if not family or friends to me. I could dislike the book. I definitely feel like I know them well enough to be able to call them like my close personal acquaintances. So, a very overlong way of me saying that the immersion is unparalleled with long books that sort of take you along without the pause of waiting for another book. I thought I'd give you like just examples of long books and like why they worked for me. So, like the first one obviously is Alemis that I read this summer, and while yes, I famously did not like the second half of this book, I was still immersed. Like I did not like it, but I felt like I'd gone through like decades of development with these people. Like I felt like I knew Jean Valjean personally, and I wanted to see what's going to happen to him and what's going to happen to the world that he's inhabiting. So it definitely felt, even when I stopped liking it, that like I was there with them. Like I'd spent the last 700 pages with these people. Like I am inside their head and I will see it through. Like it felt like a commitment that wasn't a chore, because even when not liking it, like I was already there, I was in the trenches with Jean Valjean, so I wanted to see it through. Another example, obviously, is Dune, which isn't that long of a book. Like I wrote down the page numbers for all of these, which I will put them on the screen, but Dune, another one, like by the end of the first book, you don't even have to go on with a series. I feel like I know everything about Paul Atreides, family dynamics, like what he aims for the universe, all the foreshadowing to what's actually going to keep happening. Like I was there in the desert. I could feel the sand on my face better than if I were watching it in IMAX again. So Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, I'm using this as an example of one book because it is one book. It's not 3. But again, psychologically, the first time I read it over the course of a weekend, I read it as 3 separate books, and there was a break between them. I could say I've finished Fellowship. I'm going to be reading The Two Towers whenever. But when I have this one like collection that's like one book, The Lord of the Rings, you don't get that break. It feels like one continuous story. You still get a bit of a break within the book, but it's still one object, so it doesn't feel like it's broken up into pieces. And it feels like one long story that when you get to the ending, you're like, I have the worst like world building fatigue with Tolkien. Like it takes me so much time after it to get unimmersed because I feel like I live there. I feel like I live there. I am there. I know every nook and cranny. Like I feel every breath of wind on the leaves, like the elves, the dwarves. I am there with them. It is just another level of immersion, which is why I wanted to use it to prove my point of how effective it can be when it's one chunk. And I would argue actually that I felt differently about it when I read it as one book and when I read it as like 3 chunks. It genuinely felt like I was splitting it into parts, where this felt like one continuous line. The difference could be very subjective to me. You could have the same effect if you read 3 books back to back, but just the action of like getting another physical object and putting another one down feels like it's putting distance between the immersion, and like it's not all one piece of fiction, I suppose, is the best way I can put it. The Wheel of Time is the next example. I think I'm going to put up like the longest book in the series, which is Lord of Chaos. It feels like you're there. It feels like you know all the stupid nobles in the court, in the court of Andor and Camelin. No, not Camelin. Haidien? One of those. One of those. See, I am praising the immersion, and yeah, I don't remember the names, but granted, I read Lord of Chaos, I think, like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. The next example is Crow Girl, which is another genre. It's a thriller. Like it felt like I went through the thick of it with these women, and like I knew them personally by the end of it. And another example is Willette by Charlotte Bronte, which is like her longest novel and my least favorite of her 3, but I still felt like Lucy Snow was my close personal friend by the end, and I really cared what happened to her. And like I've seen so much of her life and so much of her inner workings and her soul that by the end I was really invested in what would happen to her. I don't think I would have cared as much if it was like 250 pages, if you understand what I'm getting at. No, the other side of the coin, why I hate long books and why they're so daunting and intimidating and taxing mentally when you look at a long book. The problem with a long book is, again, the exact opposite side of the coin of why they're so good. If you don't like them, if you're not in the mood, if you find them boring, there is no end in sight. There is no light at the end of the tunnel, or at least it feels like that. If you're dragging your feet with a long book, it feels like this never-ending, dauntless, atrocious chore and task to trudge through 700 more pages of a book that you're not really into. Sometimes it can be a matter of mood, because, for example, again, The Wheel of Time, which I read in high school when the worst time of my life, I read the longer books in the series. It took me like straight up half a year, like months upon months to read them. And when you get to a boring chapter over that long of a stretch of time, you're like, this is endless. Like, this chapter killed me. Like, why would I need to spend another 3 months getting to the end of this book when I was really, really not having a good time with the stuff that I read? And my mood is already terrible, so I'm not really patient and lenient with what I'm reading. Which is, I think, very, very common today, that you either have lost the patience or are really, really not in the mood to put up with someone taking you on a longer trip. You just want them to get there already. But that's obviously a personal problem. Sometimes people put it down because they don't have the patience for it. And sometimes, like me, last year with Gormenghast, I force myself to put up with it so that I sort of heal my attention span. Like, you're going to read every word of this book. You're going to read every paragraph. I don't care how long it takes you, but you're going to read it slowly, and you're going to force yourself to be patient so you can train yourself back into being able to handle it, I suppose, being able to stand this slow pacing, even if it takes you long to do it. Now, I'm a fairly fast reader in general, but even I have to force myself to be patient with an author when I know rationally that I'm liking it, but I just can tell that like my attention and my focus is drifting because like my brain has been fried that week, or I'm too busy, or I'm too stressed or upset, or what have you. So I think the reason they're daunting isn't that they're commitments. I don't think that's the main problem for people, because you can surprise yourself by reading a long book in a short amount of time and a short book in a longer amount of time. It depends on how much you're enjoying it. Like, it won't take you the same amount of time to read a 1,000-page book if it's a classic that you're not really that into and you don't like the language, and a modern fantasy book that is like 1,200 pages, but the pacing is breakneck. It won't take you the same amount of time to get through that. So I don't think the point is the amount of time you think you're going to have to invest in this. I think the problem is you are scared that it will be too dense or slow or annoying for you, and it's far more difficult to justify trudging through a long book that you don't like. However, obviously, the solution here is to just put it down. I will mention the DNF later that I did that like saved my mood when I DNF'd that book. And there's also obviously the sunken cost fallacy that people have. However, with your personal interest, I think you just need to throw that out of your head. Like, it's all a personal exercise, in my opinion, if you're doing something voluntarily and not for school, in which case there are different skills you need to develop to be able to put up with something that you don't want to do, but you have to do. But with stuff that you do voluntarily, like reading a long book, I think you need to set a personal goal. Like, how long does it take you to see if you like a story? For me personally, it's always been around 200 pages. Like, that's my top, like the top of my, the word is eluding me, but like the farthest I will go if I don't like a book, to see if anything changes. And that depends on the book, obviously. Like, if the book is 300 pages, then I won't go that far. I think I'll go to 100 pages. So adjust that according to how long the book is. But point being, set yourself this goal that you think is a decent enough indicator of whether you will get into the writing style after a bit of time, if you will grow to like the characters when something actually happens to them, and then just drop it. No one's forcing you. No one wants you to finish this. No one will reward you if you finish it. No one will pay you for the time that you wasted on this, unless you're a booktuber with a lot of subscribers. But even in that case, it's really annoying to watch people hate reading, which is just an annoyance that I've developed over the years as a viewer. That said, set yourself a goal, see if you like it, chuck it out the window if you don't. Figuratively, not literally. That's not really environmentally friendly. However, the point that I'm getting at with this is that don't like assume it will take you years to read this long book, because it can surprise you. If it's taken you 3 months to read a few shorter books, it could easily take you 1 month to read 1,000 pages. Like, you never know, depending on how much it sucks you in. And if you feel like it's taking too long, then either embrace that and sit down and force yourself to be patient and slow with it, or again, chuck it out the window. I know it feels like the end is not nigh when you're reading a long book and you're not liking it, but believe me, just set yourself that one milestone. You'll feel better that you've reached it if you feel one tiny sense of achievement in your brain, and you will be able to drop it without having read the entirety of the 1,000 pages. So it was more of an advice column type of section than why I actually hate long books sometimes, but that's kind of it. Yeah, I don't hate long books. I hate bad books, but I hate them whether they're long or short. So this was a bit of an advice column segment. I'm so sorry. For some examples, I will go through them quickly because I feel like I talk about the books that I hated so much more often. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, I read this last year. The hardcover that I have is like almost 800 pages, which means you can imagine how long the paperback is. Every page of this felt like a chore. And again, this was one of those that I set myself up for failure with, because I could have quit this as soon as I was annoyed by the characters, but I was like, no, you're going to finish it, because I bought a fancy edition for my birthday and I read everything that I buy because I buy selectively. So I was not giving up on that one. But again, if I would have given up as soon as I realized that all the characters are unlikable and that I'm not rooting for everyone, but because that's a pretty surefire way of knowing that I will not be liking a book. I hate unlikable characters. Or rather, I don't hate unlikable characters. I hate when the entire cast is unlikable, because then I'm like, why am I here? Why am I here? I really don't want to be here. Well, this is a great example of this book felt endless. Like, I had a miserable time reading this, and I actually forced myself through it, which I can't say I'm proud of, but again, since I have that policy of reading everything that I purchase myself, I am happy that I managed to do it. Then we have The Count of Monte Cristo, which I DNF'd last year. This is an example of a book that I DNF'd. I actually set myself like a high milestone with this one, because I knew it was so beloved. Everyone in my house loves it. So I read 350, 60 pages. And when I got to the point that I was actively not reading anything because this was waiting for me on my nightstand, like when I realized that I'm looking at it and I immediately don't want to read, I was like, it's time to quit. It is time to quit. Okay. Not only did I hate my time reading it actively, I hated my time not reading it. Every time I saw it, I just wanted to forget how to read just so I don't have to pick it up. So, like, DNFing that was a beautiful, beautiful experience for me. I felt liberated. I felt free, like I could breathe again. So again, that's the type of thing that will feel great if you realize that you're not liking your time with a long book. Another one, which again, famously, I think 2 years ago I read it, the worst book I've ever read, not objectively, but as far as I despise it, like the worst book that I personally have read, Pillars of the Earth. That is also, I think, like over 1,000 pages. There was this one specific scene that I knew was in the book, which when I realized that I despised the book, I was like, you're gonna get to that scene. So I forced myself to get to that scene, and I think it was like 400 or 500 pages in, so it was like quite a bit of sunk cost fallacy as far as that's concerned. But I'm glad I went through that scene, because like that scene cemented it for me that I will never touch with a 10-foot pole anything that Ken Follett has or will written, right? I've lost the words because of how much the disgust came back to me. But yes, I had such a visceral hatred towards this novel and experience that getting to that marker that I set for myself was sort of like proof, I suppose, that I was correct, in my feeling about it, reaction to it. I proved to myself that like there was nothing that was going to change if I kept going, and I am satisfied with that. However, this is, I think, as close as I've come to physically chucking a book out the window. I immediately shoved it like to the bottom of my shelves so I wouldn't have to look at it, because I felt like physical disgust at the thought of it. So that's another example, I suppose, of what reading a long book that you hate can be like. Just another few examples. This one is very controversial, but I don't really care. That's why I'm mentioning them. This is why this is useful. Crooked Kingdom, I liked Six of Crows. I also was personally really upset by Crooked Kingdom. And a lot of it, I felt like I was just reading a meandering plot. Like, I was like, why is this so endless? Like, why is this not ending already? I read this in one day, by the way, so that was like a good 10-hour chunk of my life, at the end of which, again, I was so immersed and so upset that I was just walking around my room for like half an hour rambling to myself about how upset I was. And another two examples that are just like a bit more mild than the other two, War and Peace, or like in translation, Ratimir, I did not like like at all the writing style, the content of it. And again, I was like, page 150, I think, goodbye. And Way of Kings, which I gave Sanderson many, many, many shots. I did not like his involvement in The Wheel of Time, but I was like, that's not his series, so like maybe we can just give him a chance on his own turf. I DNF'd Mistborn, I DNF'd Way of Kings, and I think that was all that I've tried because those are supposed to be like his best two. But we're specifically mentioning Way of Kings here because these are like some of the longest books of all time. And with this, I didn't actually have a goal because I wasn't like hating it. I just wasn't liking it. But there was this one specific thing around like 200, 250 pages in that I was like, okay, that's like my final straw. Like, I'm not liking it enough to get past this. So I also got rid of that immediately. And the point of this isn't to like enrage you with the books that I didn't like or DNF'd. The point is to prove to you how there are plus sides and downsides to stopping the torture you're putting yourself through. I want to make a point that you won't get rewarded for putting yourself through a long book, so you might as well just ditch it in a dumpster. The last two sections that I have for you, which I don't know if I'm going to like combine them, and I'm looking down because my notebook is there where I like wrote out the idea for this video, but the last section, or second to last depending on how I do it, is just my tips on how to read long books. There are several ways. There are people who say it helps if you read them with someone else. There are people who say it helps if you like divide them, if you set yourself daily tasks. The thing that works for me, especially since I started reading long classics, this was a bit different with fantasy again because I find fantasy a bit more easy to be immersed in. I just set myself like a number of pages to read in one chunk. I did this with Lemmy's, and my god, was it helpful because you had something like to strive towards. I think I divided it in like give or take 50-page chunks because like those pages are crammed and the font isn't too large. So I was like, okay, like this is a reasonable amount that I can read in one sitting. So for you, it could be 100 pages, 150, 50, 25. It could be 10, whatever your like capacity is for reading at a time. And I set myself the goal actually fairly accurately. Like usually when I got to the 50 pages, I think maybe like once I felt like reading on, but I knew that I couldn't handle another 50. So I actually very consistently stopped at those like intervals that I gave myself because I was like, okay, this is about as much as I can take of Victor Hugo at this time. This is about as much of like patience that I have today at this moment. It doesn't have to be every day. It can be every week, every month, whatever you want to do. For me, the plan was to do that daily, but I did not do it daily. So like the stretch of 3 weeks became 2 months. But again, I did not mind that because I liked the pacing that I set for myself. So that's one advice. Like set yourself like a set number of pages to read at any given time, how much you could read in one sitting. It is helpful to read it with someone else, but I don't really have the ability to do that because I don't have any friends who read, which I should probably get some, but it is what it is. It is what it is. Maybe you don't have friends who read. You don't have friends who read what you do. So like I do. So you just have to make a deal with yourself instead. But if you have someone who reads the same stuff as you do, that will be a great thing. Buddy reads, online book clubs, someone like to just motivate you in general. You could set yourself goals. There are those like gamifying tasks apps that exist. You could do that. You could set yourself like a reminder. Today you're going to read 25 pages of this, and this. But the thing that is most important, I think, as far as giving advice is what I said earlier. And that is, it depends on what you want to do with the book. Because if you're able to sort of discern that it's not that you're not liking the book, it's that maybe because of the state of your brain at the moment or mood, you just don't have the patience or the mental capacity to like sit down with something that's written in this way or this dense or this slow. You need to decide whether you think it's worth it for you to force yourself to slow down with the book and to adapt to its pacing, or if you're going to put it down. That is something that you're going to have to decide for yourself. Several times, like throughout my reading life, I felt like my brain's like deep fried, like it just refuses to focus. And I forced myself to do it. Like I was like, I don't care if today all you do is read these 10 pages. you're going to retrain yourself to read every word in every paragraph. I'm specifically highlighting Gormenghast because, like, going into it, I knew it was a long, dense, really wordy book. And I knew I was not going to have the patience for it. Like, last year was the worst year I've had in, like, since high school. I was like, you're not going to have the patience for this, but you're going to force yourself. I'd lie down and be like, just go read. I don't care how annoyed you are that you're reading this paragraph and that he's using so many words. You're going to do it. And, like, I could tell that as time went on, like around 100 and 150 pages, I was clicking into it. Like, I was adapting to his pace. I was going faster while still reading, like, every word and every paragraph. Like, I was adapting to the environment of the book, to the verbiage, to the atmosphere he was building, to the way he was presenting his story. And I was so happy with it because I was like, I've effectively fixed my attention span, at least as far as this book was concerned. And I was really thrilled with that. So again, this is something that you're going to have to decide for yourself. How important is it for you that you trudge through this, even though you're finding it slow? But to do this, you need to be able to see within yourself whether the problem is you or the problem is the book, and then make the decision. I decided I just wasn't going to make, like, an extra segment for this. The whole last idea I had was, like, why long books are useful, but I feel like I sort of answered that in the last section. So we're going to wrap it up here. I gave you some examples, personal examples from my life and from my experience, from when I was in a good mood or in a bad mood, in a good headspace or in a really, really, really bad headspace. So, like, you have examples of everything from my personal experience, which, granted, when you say my lifelong experience and you're 24 years old, it is still only like a quarter of a century, but still, make of that what you will. It's still quite a long time. So, do you have any tips? Do you have any tips? Do you like long books? Do you not like long books? Do you think it's at all helpful that I've, like, encouraged you? Or do you think I should have given some research tips, which I said in the beginning I was not going to do? At this point, I'm just yapping and laughing at myself. This video is going to be long because all my videos are long. For the life of me, I cannot shut up, but that is okay. That is a good thing, because this is the one field of my life, like literature and books and stories and writing, that I don't mind yapping about, because I don't go to university. In case you're wondering, for something I am interested in, I'm going to university for something that I think is going to be useful as a skill and knowledge for me to have, but it's not something that I like or enjoy. So I think it's good for me to have this outlet where I'm going to yap, because it's essentially the only one that I have. Sounds a lot sadder than it is. Don't worry. I don't mind my university. I'm actually quite good at it. It's just not something that I'm interested in personally. So I will be seeing you in the next video, and do let me know if you like long books or not, because I really like seeing other people's opinions on certain topics, not on all of them. I don't always welcome opinions. It depends on the day, I suppose, but this time I really would like to see what anyone else has to say. So I will see you in the next video.